Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you need to know about sports. Let's welcome in the co-host of the podcast, Mark. How you doing, Mark?
Doing well. I'm excited to talk to you guys, and we were both busy last week, so we're sorry for not getting you an episode last week, but excited to be back, and I'm excited to talk about. We got quite a bit today to go over, so ready to get to it.
Yeah, so we took a week off just because life happens, and you just gotta roll with what you got sometimes in life. So that's kind of why we took a step back last week, but we're back this week, and we're going to talk about the NBA, NCAA Football as it's getting underway, and then the NFL. There's not much going on in the MLS right now, so we're not going to take a lot of time to talk about that, but let's start with the NBA. Some notable trades that have been talked about and done and stuff. And since Mark's more of the NBA expert, I'll pass this one off to you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, this offseason is probably going to be kind of tame compared to most off seasons in the NBA. It'll be quick, and we'll kind of go through that here in a little bit. But as far as trades that have happened so far since probably the last time we recorded or last time we talked NBA, the major one, I guess the biggest name is Chris Paul. Got traded from the Thunder to the Suns with a couple different picks, I think, and things like that. And that's probably the biggest name. A lot of the rest of the guys are role players. I'll go through them, but he's probably the biggest one. Was only in OKC for a year, and seemed like he enjoyed everything there, but just wasn't part of their long-term plan from everything I kind of gathered. And seems like they're just trying to accumulate as many picks and kind of assets as possible, so maybe they can trade for a superstar in the future. But he's probably the biggest name, and I think that's a substantial move. I mean, I don't think Chris Paul is maybe the player that he once was, but you have a Suns team who did really well in that play-in tournament that they had this year, and that could be a piece that could push them into being a playoff team and maybe get those young guys some playoff experience. I mean, I don't think it pushes them to the top of the NBA or to the top of the Western Conference, but I think it raises their ceiling a little bit. Do you have any thoughts about that trade in particular?
Not really. Kind of agree with you, though, on the Chris Paul. I mean, he's just not the same Chris Paul as he was, 5-10 years ago. I mean, he's been around the league for a while, and he's kind of, I don't know, he's been kind of a glue guy. He's never really been the star or anything like that. I mean, he had a good couple of years. But, I mean, he's kind of just been a glue guy that just helps teams win. And so, I don't know, it didn't really, take me back or anything. I don't really know what the Thunder are wanting to do. It kind of was weird to me that the Thunder even got him in the first place, because I felt like the Thunder really weren't in a position to win. So, it was kind of curious to me why they went and got Chris Paul anyways. But, it looks like they kind of moved and shuffled around picks and stuff. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense in the long run, but yeah, I think Chris Paul only has probably a few years left anyways, so to go to a Suns team that could possibly make a little bit of a run or something, kind of makes sense to trade him to the Suns.
Yeah, and it just seems like the Thunder and the Pelicans are both picking up as many picks as possible, trying to get off big contracts as much as possible, which is another reason to kind of get rid of Chris Paul. He's got I think high 30, low $40 million contract, and I mean, if the Thunder aren't going anywhere, might as well kind of get rid of that big contract and maybe pick up somebody else. So that's the biggest big name move, I guess. The rest of them that we'll talk about here are all, I would call them role players or kind of like B-level guys, but they're going to teams that could make some noise. I'll kind of put two together here that are both going to the Bucks, and I think you'll see them make a lot of moves this year and kind of go all in, because this is the last year that Giannis is kind of guaranteed to be there. He could move on. I think next year is his year that free agency happens for him. But two moves that are notable for them: Bogdanovic. I think he's on the Sacramento Kings. He's just a shooting guard, kind of like you were talking about, a glue guy, a role player, solid shooter, and I mean, I think it's kind of a lateral move for them. They traded away Dante DiVincenzo, who a lot of people like. He's kind of a young, up-and-coming guy who serves in the same sort of role as Bogdanovic. So I don't know if it really made them a ton better besides getting somebody with experience. And then probably the move that made a little bit more noise for them and could make some more impact was getting Jrue Holiday. Really solid defensive guard, somebody that can get you buckets and has experience in the league. But they did give up quite a bit for him. The Bucks got Jrue Holiday in a second-round pick this year, but gave up Eric Bledsoe, who was kind of disappointing last year, but could still be good for somebody. George Hill, older guy, but is a good veteran to have on your team. But then they gave up, 5 first-round picks all the way through 2027. So I think they're kind of going all in, and the Bucks are trying to either win a championship or prove that they're at least trying to be championship contenders while Giannis is there. So that's maybe not as big a names as Chris Paul, but moves for a team that could be in that championship kind of window. And then the other high-level team that made a move that I think could have some impact was the Lakers, your NBA champions. And they did pick up Dennis Schroeder, who, again, another kind of B-level guy, has always been solid, but is usually in a sixth-man role or maybe your second-best guard. They picked him up and only had to get rid of Danny Green, who's in his, I think, mid-30s now, and first-round pick this year in a draft this year that's not great. So that could be a move that could make the Lakers maybe a little bit better for next year and provide LeBron and Anthony Davis a better supporting cast. And kind of just to finish up the trade part of this, there are some other rumors that are going around, nothing being moved yet, but two biggest names are both on the Rockets, and I think this is a combination of Daryl Morey, the general manager, leaving, and from what I've heard, the coaching search, these guys really didn't end up with the person they liked, but James Harden and Russell Westbrook have both been talked about in trades for the Rockets. I think Westbrook was probably going to get traded in the next year or so anyway, just because he has a big contract, kind of like Chris Paul, and is still okay, but probably on the downward slope of his career. But James Harden's definitely probably one of the better guys in the NBA. I don't necessarily like the way he plays all the time, but he's probably one of the more talented guys in the league, and he's been talked about for trades to, I think Brooklyn is his preferred destination, teaming back up with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving there. So no official moves there, but just a lot of rumors for both those guys, and those would both definitely be big shakeups in the league as far as stars go. Because then you'd have probably some people would call it a super team in Brooklyn. I think there'd be a lot of strong-headed guys kind of butting heads there with a new coach and Steve Nash, so that could be kind of combustible, but those are just kind of, those last two are rumors for now. And we'll move on to kind of the offseason, getting into next season. The NBA draft is tonight. I don't pay as much attention to college basketball as I used to. Have you, in the last year or so, paid a lot of attention to college basketball? I mean, I know last year was weird, but with COVID-19 kind of cutting everything short. But did you pay attention to college basketball a lot last year?
A little bit, mostly just the big players and the players that played KU, like Obi Toppin. Played against KU last year, and he was basically unstoppable. So, I don't know. I mean, there's a few players in the draft that I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But, I didn't see a lot from, the Georgia guy. Didn't get to see him play a lot. So, usually you see those players, in the tournament because you see people like Georgia play. It's hard to just watch Georgia play when you don't live in Georgia. So, yeah, I mean, some of the names I know, some are obviously overseas, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint those. But, yeah, I mean, we missed a lot just with not having the tournament. We just missed a lot of good players playing in the tournament. So I only really got to see the Big 12 or whoever KU played this season.
Yeah, and like you said, there is a lot of kind of foreign guys that are going to be towards the top of a lot of draft boards and a lot of draft guides so far. LaMelo Ball, I guess you can consider him an international player, born in America, raised in America, but kind of forewent his college eligibility for a couple different reasons, but played in Australia or New Zealand, I believe, last year. He's considered a top pick. Anthony Edwards, a Georgia guy you're talking about, he's up there. James Wiseman, another guy with kind of a weird situation, declared ineligible by the NCAA last year because of a booster situation with his coach Penny Hardaway. But from everything I've heard from kind of draft experts, this isn't the greatest draft. I mean, you got potential with some guys, but a lot of people are looking forward to next year and the year after as far as maybe more talent-loaded drafts. I'm surprised you mentioned Obi Toppin, and he was, I think, during the college basketball season up there as far as one of the guys who could be one of the top picks, and I don't know why he's fallen as far as being a top pick. I mean, I looked at a draft guide before we started talking, and I think he's listed like 10 or 12. And it could be just one of those things we've had so much time since the basketball season ended that people are starting to nitpick everything, and he started to drop. I think he could be a steal. It'll just be interesting to see what the top couple picks do, because I think that'll really throw a wrench into what everybody else does, because there's no consensus like number one guy. There's no LeBron. There's no Anthony Davis. So really you can't predict the top 3 to 5 guys. So I think that could throw a wrench if somebody like LaMelo starts to drop, or James Wiseman, if he starts to drop, that could really throw a wrench into things. But we'll see how it goes. Top couple of teams that could get better right away. I mean, the Warriors have, I think, the number 2 pick, and they're getting Clay back and Steph back, so they could be good right away. Timberwolves have the number 1 pick, and I mean, they were a borderline almost playoff team last year, so have teams that are good with high picks, so they could see guys going to good situations right away. Moving on from that, free agency does start on Friday. Again, we said that there's really not much that's probably going to happen this year. No big names. Anthony Davis is probably going to re-sign with the Lakers. That'd be the biggest name, but I haven't heard anything to the contrary on that. And it's just not a big free agent class. We'll kind of skip over that, but it is kind of tonight and Friday with the draft and free agency is the start of what's going to be a pretty short lead up to the season. The NBA did put out kind of what their tentative schedule is, and of course, with COVID-19, things could get thrown off or delayed, postponed, that sort of thing. But drafts tonight, free agencies on Friday. I think training camps start like next week or the week after. I bet they have off for Thanksgiving, but into November. And then preseason games start in like the second week of December. So pretty quick turnaround from the playoffs to beginning of the season. And we talked about a couple weeks ago that not all the players like that, but I think they're just trying to kind of save as normal of a schedule as possible, and maybe in 2021-22 season have it back to normal. But what their tentative schedule is for now is preseason games from December 11th to the 19th, and then they're kind of splitting up the season into 2 halves. I think it's going to be a 72-game season, just to shorten it up and make sure they still get everything on their normal timeline. But they're going to have the first half of the season from December 22nd to March 4th. Then they're going to have an all-star break from the 5th to the 10th. And for some reason I thought I heard that there may not be an actual all-star game, but they just give them that kind of 5 to 7 day break in the middle of the season. The second half of the season will be March 11th through May 16th. They are going to do the play-in tournament again. Seemed like it went well this year and kind of drummed up some more drama and attention, so they're doing that again this next year. And then playoffs are supposed to be from May 22nd to July 22nd, so they get back to kind of ending in July like they normally would. Does anything catch your eye on their schedule for next year?
I guess I would have to look at what their normal schedule is, but the December 22nd to March 4th, it's almost like over 3 months for the first half, and then the second half is only a couple months, and then the playoffs is a couple months. It just, I don't know, is it normally like that, or is it, are they giving them more breaks in the first half of the season?
I mean, I think just with they're moving it down to 72 games, so I think they're going to kind of try to lighten the load a little bit. I think it's still basically the same time frame. I'd have to look and see when All-Star Game usually is. For some reason, I think it might usually be in April, but I think just with the deduction of 10 games, it'll probably even out, and it will be fast-paced still, but I think with taking out 10 games, you'll have a break here and there that you didn't before, and should probably keep at the same pace as maybe a normal season.
Yeah, and I feel like that's in the best interest of the NBA in general, and especially its players, because I mean, they just got done 2 months ago, basically, and now they're basically starting to ramp up a new season. And usually they have off more time than that, more time to kind of rest their bodies and get their bodies rejuvenated. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot more breaks in this season as far as players playing, because I mean they just got done playing, and to kind of give them just a month or two off and then get them right back in where they have to play at a high level. I mean, it's a lot to ask, and I'm interested. It's going to be interesting to see though if maybe injuries happen more often, or kind of what goes on throughout the season. Maybe we get to the second half of the regular season, and the Lakers are up by how many ever games, and now their stars are resting every other game or something, just because they want them to be 100% for the playoffs. So I guess I guess we'll see. Yeah, it's good that they turned down it from 82 to 72 games, but it's still going to be interesting to see, because of usually I think they have 4 months in between the season or something. Now they only have 2. So I mean, they're missing a lot of recoup time and time where players kind of just rejuvenate and get ready for another long season, and they don't really have that time to do that. So, and especially if a team like the Lakers or teams that went deep in the playoffs, they have even less time to do that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be NCAA football, and a little bit's happened since the last 2 weeks, I guess, since we didn't talk to you last week. So there's been some big movements, and with the new conferences starting, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 kind of starting up football now, we're seeing some more movement and standings and stuff. And I guess the biggest thing to talk about that we didn't get to last week was the Notre Dame beating Clemson in overtime without Trevor Lawrence, and I watched the whole game. It was a pretty good game to watch. I mean, I had Notre Dame winning it just because I watched Clemson struggle against Boston College, and then I was like, wow, there's no way they're going to be able to beat that Notre Dame team. And then it was actually ended up being really, really close, a really close game. And, I mean, Clemson's good, and if they would have had Trevor Lawrence, they probably would have ran away with that one, honestly. Just a couple of missed throws by their backup quarterback kind of cost them that game. But, Notre Dame winning goes up to 2, but the biggest thing for me is that Clemson lost, and they only go down to number 4, which still has them at number 4 in the college football playoffs. So they lost, and they went from 1 to 4, but they're still in the college playoffs as of now. There's a few teams that could probably knock them out if they just continue to win. But I would say that Clemson's still going to get a chance at the national championship, even with Trevor Lawrence out those couple of games. Notre Dame probably looking like they're going to stay in it. They're up to number 2, and they got UNC, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So some pretty easy games left on their schedule. So I think a lot will change. Anything surprise you about that game?
Not really. I guess the only thing kind of that I've heard coming out of that is I think Clemson didn't really drop that much because you see how good their team is even without their best guy, without Trevor Lawrence. They still held on with what's the number 2 team in the country now and forced them to overtime. So they're going to be one of the better teams in the NCAA. So I think that's why the voters only dropped them down to 4. And they know that if Trevor Lawrence was there, if he'd been playing, that it might have been a different situation, and they might have held on to, I think they're at the number 1 spot. So I'm not surprised that they're only down to number 4 now, and if they win out, I'm not sure what their schedule is. I think it gets easier from here. But I think if they win out, then they have a chance to stay in that playoff picture. And like you said, Notre Dame really doesn't have anybody too tough as far as their games left. North Carolina, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So unless there's an upset somewhere, you probably have 2 of your playoff teams set unless something weird happens in any other conference. But you probably have 2 of your playoff teams right there that already faced off this season.
And another playoff team looking right now is going to probably be Ohio State if they can continue to win. But this week they're going to have a tough one against Indiana, which, I didn't even know Indiana was good at football. I thought they were like Kansas and didn't really play football. But apparently they're really good this year, and they're up to number 9. They just keep beating everyone. So we'll see what kind of fight goes up against Ohio State because, I mean, Indiana looked really good early on, and they beat Penn State, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're so good. But Penn State hasn't even won a game yet. I think they're 0-3 or 0-4 now. So that game doesn't look as big as it used to. But we'll see what Indiana can do against Ohio State because, again, Ohio State's just another, beast to tame. It's kind of like, there's these teams that are around the 10 and 8 and 7 range that are really good and can be some really good teams, but then you have like your core, like your top 4 or 5 teams that are just kind of, honestly, just better than everybody else. And those are like your Alabamas, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame. So those top 4 teams right there, unless they lose, those would be my like top 4 going into the college playoffs. But yeah, it's just it's gonna be different. Since like Ohio State, they're only going to get like 6 games. So if they lose one, they're basically done. There's no way they're going to come back. If they lose, they're basically done. And that's kind of the same thing with some Pac-12 teams. Like you look at Oregon, they're in the top 10, but if they lose once, there's no way they're going to ever make that ground up. Whereas, Clemson, they lost one, but they still have been playing really, really good all season. So there's no reason for them not to be in that top 4. Some other notable games, I guess, that could be kind of potential upsets or something. Number 7, Cinci goes to UCF. UCF is like 5-2, I believe, on the year. And they're a decent football team, but I don't think Cinci's really been challenged up to this point. So it'll be interesting to see if they are a top 10 team and show their number 7 ranking, or if they're just beating everybody they're supposed to and they have a close game against another good team in UCF. Number 10 Wisconsin is at number 19 Northwestern. Could be a big game because, again, Big Ten school that kind of started late. So if Wisconsin wants any chance of being in the college playoffs, they got to win every single game. So they go against number 19 Northwestern. Then we got Kansas State at number 17 Iowa State. K-State's showed up and had several upsets this year. So K-State's always a hard game to play in the Big 12. So might be on upset alert there. Then we got Mississippi State at Georgia. Georgia has lost 2 already, but I don't know, that team looks good, but they can't seem to get over the hurdle and beat the great teams. But Mississippi State's put up a fight against Georgia before, so another kind of trap game for Georgia there. And then number 14, Oklahoma State at number 18, Oklahoma. And to be honest with you, there's a couple of Big 12 schools that are good, but I just don't think there's going to be any Big 12 schools that make it to the playoffs this year. And not necessarily because there's so many good schools that they're beating up on each other. I think mostly it's just the Big 12 is down this year. I feel like Oklahoma is usually just absolutely blowing people out, and Texas is always putting up a fight, or you'll get like an Oklahoma State or a Texas Tech or K-State kind of like coming out of nowhere and only losing 1 game in the Big 12. But there's really not anybody like that in the Big 12 this year that's kind of dominating everyone. Everyone's kind of just hanging out in the middle and just beating up on each other. So I think this might be the first year that a Big 12 team has never made it to the playoff, even though they just started the playoffs like a couple years ago. But I think it's kind of big to think about, is that, is the Big 12 going down in football, or is it just there's so many top tier teams that they're kind of be pushed or brushed aside? And like you said earlier, we look at Clemson and Notre Dame. Those 2 teams are from the ACC. So, there could possibly be 2 ACC teams in the college playoffs. And then, Ohio State is a Big Ten team. And then, so I don't know. I just worry because the Big 12 has kind of been football-led, as in the conference been able to stay Power 5 and been able to, be one of the top conferences because of their football program. So it'll be interesting to see if, next year's different. I know coming into the season, Oklahoma was supposed to be really, really good, but they just haven't really lived up to it. And then just with COVID and everything, there's a bunch of games that have been postponed and canceled. I've seen a couple of games where Like one team will have their game canceled because the opposing team will have too many cases of COVID, but they'll actually pair them together with another team that got their game canceled. So they're still getting games in, which is kind of good to see from the NCAA. So I don't know. I don't really know what's going to happen. I don't even know if they're going to have the college playoffs. I haven't heard anything on either side whether or not they will or they won't. But it's just something to think about going forward.
Yeah, and kind of just to maybe hit on some of that stuff you went over there with some of these matchups. The Wisconsin-Northwestern one excites me just because I think Wisconsin's been off for a couple weeks because of a COVID outbreak, and their quarterback, Graham Mertz, is a Kansas guy. I think he's from Olathe, and had just a fantastic first game out, and then they had to kind of shut everything down because of COVID. So we'll see if he can keep that up. Ohio State is kind of my Big Ten team I've always rooted for, I guess. So we'll see how they do. And they're facing off against Indiana, and I kind of checked their schedule while you're talking about that. And Indiana has a tougher schedule to finish out the year. I mean, they face Ohio State, and then they face Wisconsin again in a couple weeks. So we'll definitely see how good the Hoosiers are there. You did talk about the Big 12 a lot, and I agree that there's no outstanding team. It's not like how it has been the past couple of years where Oklahoma's dominating everybody, like you said, and everybody's just kind of in the middle. So I think they are kind of picking each other off, but there's no legitimate threat to be number 4 in the nation or be in that playoff hunt. So that is kind of sad, and might see the Big 12 drop down to maybe about the third or fourth best football team, or third or fourth best football conference in the nation, just because of kind of lack of talent or lack of a dominant team. And yeah, we've seen I haven't talked about it in a while, but my other job outside of real estate is being the sports information director for the KCAC, and we're seeing the same thing on our level where a lot of games are getting canceled or postponed. And I mean, I basically have to check all our school schedules every day at this point, because part of my job is to make graphics that go on our social media channels, and it's kind of the same thing where if 2 teams have had their opponents canceled because of COVID, I think the administrations are being flexible and trying to match up with somebody else who has an open date now because of a COVID cancellation. So definitely interesting, and I think college conferences and the NAIA and the NCAA are doing the best they can to make sure the season goes on as planned, but definitely a lot of upheaval. I mean, in our case for the KCAC, I think we only have 1 football game out of about 5 that were scheduled that are playing this week. Men's and women's soccer is basically done. I mean, I think there was like 5 or 6 women's soccer games that were scheduled that they all got canceled this week. Basketball has been hit and miss. So it's just interesting, and you kind of have to keep your head on a swivel and make sure you check who's playing who day to day. But definitely the most interesting college season in that case we've seen in a long time.
So the last thing we'll talk about is the NFL. Last week, a couple of big things happened. If you've been paying attention to sports or anything at all, the Colts and Titans. The Colts able to pull one away from the Titans, and lately I just feel like the Titans have kind of, I wouldn't say feathered off, but they're just, the games that they were winning before, they were kind of getting, again, not lucky, but they're winning really close games, and now they are not winning those close games. So it's kind of interesting to look and see the Titans kind of slithered themselves into the playoffs last year, and this year they came out strong, looking like they're going to be one of the best teams, and then now they've kind of had that slippery slope on the way down.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both picked the Colts and the Titans as probably the 2 best teams in the AFC South, and yeah, like you said, the Titans have just kind of been meh this year. I mean, they're good. They're tied with the Colts for the lead in the division, but they haven't been impressive, and they've had a lot of their season derailed by COVID delays. So I think the Colts are starting to look like the better team at this point. A lot of people were high on the Colts going into the season, so that might not be too much of a surprise, but that was a big win this weekend for the Colts to kind of get the tiebreaker as far as the lead in the division.
Then we had the Dolphins winning again, and they're 3-0 under Tua since he's become the quarterback. And yeah, the Dolphins have just looked like a completely different team compared to what they usually are. A couple of years ago, they were the 0-16 type of team, and now, I wouldn't say they're a top end team, but they are winning games that they should be winning, and they're showing that they're on the uphill right now. The Bills and Cardinals, if you haven't seen the play already, then I would suggest going somewhere, probably YouTube, and watching it. But the Hail Mary win, the Bills caught a touchdown with 40-something seconds left, 20-something seconds left in the fourth quarter, and they, NFL team, you get a touchdown to go up with 20 seconds left. Chances are you're probably going to win that game, and so it was just funny to see that that in 20 seconds changed so drastically fast, and it was a fun play, and I think that's when you say that the Cardinals got the better end of that trade with the Texans, because they got Hopkins, again, one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he kind of showed it with that catch.
Yeah, those are still two top of the NFL kind of teams, maybe not the best, but right up there with probably that 5-10 range as far as the Bills and the Cardinals go. And you talked about the Dolphins. They're beating good teams. With Tua, they beat the Rams, the Cardinals, and then a Los Angeles Chargers team that's maybe not great as far as record, but has been feisty in a lot of games. So they're looking good. And the Bills will have to kind of watch their back, because the Dolphins are only basically one game behind them. Bills are 7-3, Dolphins are 6-3. So that could be a lot more close fight for the AFC East than a lot of people thought going into the season. So definitely a lot of impactful games this last week. Another one was the Rams and Seahawks, which the NFC West is probably the most competitive division in football. Rams won, and the Seahawks are starting to kind of see them slide back a little bit. They're on a 2-game losing streak, and Russell Wilson is having some issues with turnovers and things like that. So still a decent team and could make a run, but you're seeing them starting to fall back a little bit.
And just looking at the division leaders right now, we're about 9 games into the season, depending on who hasn't had their bye yet. Watched a lot of football last weekend, and got to admit, with the Chiefs on a bye, it was kind of boring to watch. There wasn't really any really good games going on. So glad to have them back this week. But looking at the division leaders as of right now, the AFC East is led by the Buffalo Bills. But as you said, they got to watch their back because the Dolphins are coming. AFC North, Pittsburgh Steelers 9-0. They stay undefeated, and they played Cincinnati this weekend. And I actually thought Cinci would have a chance at beating them, because Pittsburgh's kind of struggled their last couple of games to kind of pull away from their opponent. And, from watching Cinci the last couple of weeks, they've been in games late. They just haven't been able to pull them out. But Pittsburgh took care of them and improved to 9-0. The AFC South is a tie between the Colts and Titans. We talked about that game earlier. The Colts own the tiebreaker there. And then the AFC West, KC Chiefs, 8-1. They're leading pretty handfully. We'll find out more this weekend as they go to Las Vegas. NFC East is led by the Eagles at 3-5-1. Yes, you heard that right. 3 wins, 5 losses, and 1 tie. It's wow. It's I don't know what to say, because I've watched these NFC East teams play, and they're all just absolutely terrible. And I don't know. I don't know how the NFL does the draft, because I know in the NBA, if you make, it doesn't really matter your record. If you make the playoffs, you're automatically out of the running of the lottery draft. But I believe the NFL is based on record. So the Eagles seriously could get a top 10 pick but still make the playoffs. And so I don't know if the Eagles will end up being the one out of the NFC East. Dallas has got a new quarterback, and he looked decent. As decent as you can look. But the NFC East is going to be interesting to watch, and I think it will literally be up to the last weekend on who's going to win that division. The NFC North, Packers are up in that division at 7-2 record. The NFC South, Saints are 7-2, but Drew Brees being injured out for at least a couple of weeks with a five broken ribs and a collapsed lung, I think. And so he's going to be sidelined for a little bit. We'll have to see. The assumption is that what's his name? Just blinked. Jameis Winston will take over the quarterback role there, and we'll see if that's what they end up doing. So we'll see how the Saints do for the next couple of weeks without Drew Brees. And then the NFC West is a three-way tie between the Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks, all at 6-3. And I think that is actually going to be the division that has the biggest, longest run to the end, because I think Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks, all three, can win that division at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure they expanded the playoffs to 7 teams this year, if I remember correctly. I think it's normally 6, but I think they expanded to 7 this year. So, I mean, you can honestly see 3 teams from the NFC West make it if they all kind of stay at that same level. And, I mean, like you said, NFC East, nobody's going to be stealing a playoff spot there. And then the Bears are 5-5, so they could be nipping on the heels of those 3 teams, but the Bears haven't looked great all year. They've just been kind of average. You'll probably see 2 teams from the NFC South with the Buccaneers and the Saints. But definitely, I think the best division in football is the NFC West right now. The AFC North could maybe give them a run for their money with the Ravens and the Browns, but it just seems like the NFC West teams are winning more high-profile games there. So I think this year it seems like there's more... It's more of an even field, I guess. You're seeing more teams that are kind of in it by the 9 to 10 game point. In a lot of seasons, you see teams starting to kind of drop out or starting to maybe tank a little bit to get a better draft pick. But, I mean, AFC East, you got 2 teams that could make the playoffs. AFC North, you got 3. Got 2 teams fighting for the AFC South title. AFC West, the Chiefs, I think, will win that easily. But the Raiders are at 6-3, so they're competitive. You just got a lot of good teams this year and no real dominant team besides the Steelers. And I don't even think they're maybe as dominant as their record would say, but they just kept winning. So probably the most interesting as far as maybe the playoff race that we've seen in a while in the NFL.
Yeah, and there's some teams I feel like that we thought were going to be really, really good coming into it and just haven't lived up to expectations, the Titans being one of them. And the other one, honestly, is the Ravens. I thought the Ravens for sure would be up against the Chiefs in the AFC title game. But I honestly, the last couple of weeks, I've watched the Ravens play, and I guess Lamar can't do it all himself. And so, honestly, I mean, my opinion is that they aren't as good as, we thought they were, basically. And they're not playing up to where they did last year. So I honestly don't really see the Ravens being a big part in the playoffs. I mean, I'm sure they'll make it. I'm sure they'll make it in, but I don't see them having a crazy record. I saw the game against New England, and they just seemed lost. They just basically couldn't do anything unless Lamar Jackson did it himself, and so. It was kind of eye-opening to see that a team like that was so good last year, and this year they kind of just fallen on their feet right now. So if I had to guess at this point in the season, the AFC obviously I think has the better teams in it as far as top-end teams. You got the Chiefs, you got the Steelers, the Buffalo Bills are playing really, really well. And then you look at the other side, and you have the Packers and Saints. And then I think the NFC West could get 3 teams in, but I don't look at those 3 teams and say, oh, one of these could make it to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, just looking at it now, I would say there's probably a top 4 teams right now, and that would be like the Packers, the Saints, the Steelers, and the Chiefs. But again, it's going to change. We know that. I mean, COVID's going to happen. Players are going to, we'll see what happens in the end. But so far through the season, some surprising teams and some, I guess, not so surprising teams.
Yeah, and kind of hitting on what you said about the Ravens. I don't remember if it's from Lamar himself or another player on the Ravens, but somebody said to a reporter that they heard the defense calling out the plays that they're going to do. So the Ravens offense is kind of getting predictable, and teams are picking up on some of their tendencies and stuff. So that might be why we kind of see a drop off this year, and Lamar is maybe not having that MVP season that he had last year. And I think their offensive coordinator, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I think he might have been with the 49ers when they were kind of transferring from Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick, and you saw Kaepernick have that good run for a good year or two and then kind of tail off. And people are kind of nervous that Lamar does that. I think Lamar is a little bit higher level player than Kaepernick was, but just may need to kind of switch up play calls and what they do, because I think teams are starting to maybe figure that out now that they have a good year or so of film on Lamar in this Ravens offense. So if they want to make a move and stay competitive in their division, they need to kind of switch up their playbook and how they do things.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I try to explain to people on my streaming channel when I'm playing games, and because I know what play usually the defense is running based on several things, and NFL knows, NFL coaches know better than anybody. You can look at a defense and you either send a guy in motion, you know almost exactly what play they're running. You just have to figure out how to beat that play. And so you're kind of seeing that, like what you said with the Ravens. I mean, they know that, hey, in 3rd down and 7 to go, and the running back's in the backfield, chances are it's going to be an option. So, you know what I mean? Like, they know those tendencies. They watch film for hours and hours and hours. So, it could be a simple fix for the Ravens. Maybe they, add a couple of different plays in those opportunities for like a 3rd and 7. Maybe they do a play action or something that would be, not expecting from the defense, and they get some big plays. But if you look at the teams that do a good job on that, you look at the Chiefs. They got all this misdirection. They got all these weird plays that work. You got a tight end shovel pass. Like they change it up every week, and it's almost impossible to stop because you have no idea what's coming when you're a defense, and you're like, oh, well, they have 4 different people that can beat us. They run all these weird tight end options, and it's just, those are the teams that are going to succeed, or the teams that are constantly changing their playbook, and so that might be something that the Ravens need to do. They might need to just completely change their philosophy, change their playbook, and see if that might be the missing piece. Because, the last couple of weeks, they have not looked good, and it's basically like Lamar's just running for his life out there. And I know they haven't had a lot of, like, running back help, but, I mean, they got one of the best tight ends in Andrews, and he just hasn't done anything lately. You got Marquise Hollywood Brown, and he hasn't done anything. So I don't know. I feel like they have the talent there. They just, something's missing, and so you might have hit it on the head with, they're becoming way too predictable, because defenses know it. I mean, they watch game tape for hours and hours and hours, so they know basically what's coming. So you have to basically just either be better than the other team defensively, or you have to figure out different wrinkles you can add in to your offense that will keep them kind of guessing, well, last time they did this, but are they going to do it this time, type of thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this next week. There are a couple of interesting games that could have impact on division standings or just kind of the playoff race. Arizona and Seattle, 2 of those NFC West teams that are all kind of at the same level. They face off on Thursday. We were talking about Baltimore. They play Tennessee at home on Sunday. 2 teams that are top half of the league there, even if they are maybe not where we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. They're still decent teams. Green Bay and Indianapolis, they play Sunday. Kansas City travels to Las Vegas on Sunday night, and may not be as close in the standings as maybe some of these other teams, but Kansas City is going to be looking for that revenge game. Their one loss this year was to the Raiders, so we'll see if they can get their revenge there. And then good Monday night game. Don't always get those, but a good Monday night game with the Rams at Tampa Bay. 2 solid NFC teams that could be playoff contenders. Do any of those games stand out to you, or do you have any other games that you're looking forward to?
I mean, really all of them are going to be good games. The Arizona and Seattle game will be good because it's in the division, and both of them are pretty neck and neck. It kind of just depends on, I guess, how the game shakes out, because I feel like Arizona, Seattle, and Rams are all kind of just neck and neck, and they're clearly the best 3 in that division out of 4 teams. And I mean, they're, you know what I mean? So I think they're just going to beat up on each other all year because I feel like kind of just based on the night kind of determines which team is better. Tennessee and Baltimore one, it'll be interesting to see if Baltimore can get a victory get a victory against Tennessee, kind of prove that, it's not just a fluke. Indianapolis and Green Bay, it'll be interesting to see if Indianapolis can pull off a upset against Green Bay. Green Bay's kind of looked a little shaky lately. Last week, they were down late, and if you bet on them to win the game, you win a lot of money. But, they came back and won with Adams scoring the last touchdown with like a couple minutes left in the game. And then Kansas City at Vegas, it's mostly going to be I'm hoping it will be a blowout. I mean, Vegas honestly put it to us last time. We just had no way defensively to stop them, and hopefully the Chiefs have figured that out, and hopefully they can take care of that. And then the Rams and Tampa Bay will be a good game. Tampa Bay seems to be hit and miss every week. They played the Giants, and they just look like crap, and it's like the Giants aren't that good. You should be able to beat this team pretty easily. And then last week they went against Carolina, and the week before Kansas City had a little problem with Carolina, but Caffrey was out this week against Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay kind of blew the doors open on Carolina. The biggest thing from this all, I think, is the Chiefs. As a Chiefs fan, just recently, last couple days, head coach and general manager, right? Veach is the GM. Both of them received extensions, so it sounds like and looks like the Chiefs dynasty is going to continue for at least a while. But you just never know. You never know what's going to happen, and we'll have to wait and see how it actually plays out through the next 5 years or something. But as a Chiefs fan, you got to be happy with that news, knowing that everyone's kind of on the same page and everyone's getting, I guess, the money kind of owed to them.
Yeah, and I was going to put that in our outline, forgot, but I'm glad you brought it up. I think, they both agreed to roughly 5-year extensions. I don't think I saw exact terms or anything, but that's something we talked about in our NFL division preview podcast, that the Chiefs in the next couple of years are going to have to start making moves just with salaries and paying guys, and at least having consistent leadership will provide kind of a steadying force for the Chiefs. And you got Patrick Mahomes locked up. You got Andy Reid, one of the best coaches in the league, locked up. Brent Veach has been probably one of the better GMs past couple of years as far as making the necessary moves to keep the Chiefs in it and keep them under the salary cap. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chiefs lose some of the guys that we've come to know and love in the next couple of years just because we can't afford them, or maybe they start to tail off. But looking forward to how the Chiefs move on from here and how Reid and Veach kind of interact.
And as a Chiefs fan, you're happy to see it because in Kansas City, you don't have the huge market that California or New York or some teams like those have. Very, very large sums of money that they can bring in people. I mean, you look at the Dodgers. I mean, they bring in pretty much anybody they want. Same thing with the New York Yankees. They can basically bring in anybody they want. And in Kansas City, you saw it happen with the Royals. The Royals made it to a World Series. They didn't win it. Then they won a World Series, and instead of being able to re-up their guys and keep it going, they couldn't afford it. And so they basically had to just be like, player dump, because we can't afford to keep all the good players, but we can't afford to keep, a good team fielded. And so I was kind of worried about, what happens when, we're going to have to pay Patrick Mahomes a lot of money to keep him there, and I'm sure they're going to do it, but, what does the other cast look like? Do we have to sell out and basically hope that Patrick Mahomes can carry us himself? But they've done a really good job of keeping within salary cap and all that good stuff, and it's going to be exciting to see from a Kansas City fan, because usually in this type of thing we win 1 or 2 years, and then we just can't afford everyone because everyone's too good and wants paid too much, and then we kind of just go down and have to wait for our turn. But it does sound like with everything going on in the Chiefs organization that hopefully they can keep this going for several years to go.
Well, in the NFL's, kind of unique maybe compared to baseball with the hard salary cap in the NFL, so makes it a little bit more even, but you're right, just kind of making sure that salaries get kind of staggered here and there, and the juggling of salaries is really difficult, so good to see that leadership's been locked up in Kansas City. And to kind of finish up here, we're going to look back at our last week in fantasy football and look forward to this next week. How'd you do this week?
I won, but it wasn't pretty. So I ended up winning 103 to 66, and you might think, 103 is pretty good. Well, this league's usually a little higher for points scored. Usually you could score around 130, 140 every week, but yeah, I didn't do so well. Russell Wilson didn't have his 30-point day that he normally has. He only had 17. Michael Thomas just has not done much, and I'm a little worried because Breeze being out now, how much will he do with Breeze being out? So he got me like 4.7 points. He had like 27 yards receiving. Terry McLaurin did really, really well for me as always. Had 17. Cooper Kupp had 10. Was projected to have 16. Dalvin Cook had a decent day. Not a wonderful day, but he got me 15 points. And then Nick Chubb coming back from Cleveland. That game was absolutely horrendous to watch between the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. It was 10-7, but Nick Chubb got his yards, got his points. And then I had Mark Andrews, kind of talked about the Baltimore tight end. He ended up scoring me 13. I didn't have a kicker go, and the plan is if the game was close between my other opponent, if the game was close, then I would go out and get a kicker late, either like a Sunday night kicker or a Monday kicker. But after the first couple of rounds of games, it didn't look like it was going to be that close, so I didn't worry about going out and losing my kicker. And then I had Miami's defense score me 6.5. But yeah, basically the only really reason I won it was the opponent just didn't have a good day. He had like a DK Metcalf, who usually scores a lot of points. He had 4 points. James Conner usually scores a bunch of points. He only had 6. He just didn't have a lot of high point scoring guys. It was kind of like a down week. So kind of skimmed away with that victory, and so we're happy with it. Moving on to this week, we're 4th place right now. We're playing the 5th place guy. And it should be a close one, but we got Russell Wilson going again. We got the normal guys going again. We're not really worried about bye weeks this week, so that's good to see. We're kind of through those big bye weeks. There are teams that still have bye weeks, like the Giants, I believe, are on a bye this week, but most of the teams I feel like already passed their byes. How did you do last week, Mark?
Kind of like you. It wasn't pretty. I ended up losing by 12, but neither myself or my opponent really performed that well. I had 122 points. He had 134, and I think we're both teams that our teams have scored probably in the 140s to 160s most of the year. So really wasn't too pretty on the other side. But my opponent is still the number one. The guy I just played is still the number one team in our league. I think he's undefeated at 10-0. So I wish I got a win there. I think the biggest thing for me kind of going here towards the end of the season is just going to be finding guys who can stay consistent. And I think this happens about every year, and I need to kind of break myself of it, but I get really stuck on keeping these guys who have a hot start in there and thinking that maybe they can recapture some of that magic. And I might need to kind of let some of them go and make some more moves. I've been making moves to kind of shore up my wide receiver position and get a solid number 3 guy, but I'll go over that in a little bit. Aaron Rodgers did fine for me. Josh Allen, I have him as well, but he only got 5 more points, so can't really complain too much there. Adam Thielen had 20 points for me, outscored his projection. And I think one way to kind of fix my wide receiver situation is I have Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson both on the Vikings, and I normally don't like to play 2 guys from the same team because they might end up kind of eating the other's production, I guess you could say. And one guy might end up having a great game, the other guy only has 5 points. But they've both seemed to have good games. So I might have to move Justin Jefferson up off the bench and play them both at the same time. T. Higgins, I picked him up a couple weeks ago, and he's been playing solid. A rookie wide receiver from Cincinnati. He had 22 points, which was basically twice what he was projected to get against Pittsburgh. I had Devontae Parker from the Dolphins as my third receiver in the starting lineup, and like I said, I might have to move him out in favor of Justin Jefferson or Calvin Ridley if he ever gets healthy again. He's been out for a while and is on my bench, so we'll see how my wide receiver position kind of plays out. Aaron Jones did fine. He was a little bit under his projected total, but did fine. Mike Davis of the Panthers is one guy I'm kind of frustrated with. Because McCaffrey might come back here. He's kind of been hit and miss as far as if he can stay healthy, but Mike Davis had a good start to the season, but I was just looking at his totals from his last 4 games, and they're all about 8 points, which isn't going to cut it for a starter, so I might have to kind of let him go, and I picked up, J.D. McKissick from the Washington football team. I might have to move him up into my starting lineup and bench Mike Davis just because he's not being consistent. Darren Waller, again, another guy who had a good start to the year, tight end for the Raiders, and he only got 6 points last week, so that was kind of disappointing, but we'll see how he does going forward. Kicker, don't have much to complain about. Got Lutz from the Saints. He had 11 points, which is about what he had projected. And then I need to find a defense because I've been cycling through teams, and I had Tennessee's defense. They lost 34-17 to the Colts and only got me 1 point. So not too much to talk about with my defenses there. I'm looking forward to this week. Let's see. I play the number 8 team in the league, so that could be a way for me to kind of turn around and improve myself in the standings. 8-team league, if that says anything, but just have to kind of find some consistency. And right now, just kind of as far as our league standings go, we do have one person at 10-0, like I talked about. Then 3 of us tied at 6-4. Looks like you and I and one other person are tied at 6-4. Got a couple 4-6 teams, then 3-7 team and a 1-9 team. So kind of some congestion in the middle there as far as who might be one of the top teams when it comes to the fantasy playoffs, but we'll see how things go. And I guess big overall theme for me is just trying to find more consistency and find the right guys to put in there as the fantasy playoffs get closer. And we thank everybody for listening. We'll try to come to you guys on a regular basis. Like Trevor said, sometimes life just happens, and we'll try to come to you guys every week. We appreciate you guys listening, and if you have subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple, Spotify, whatever app you use. You can also listen to our podcasts on our YouTube channel. You can find that by searching Slacker Sports Show. We put the audio there. And then you can also follow us on Twitter to get updates. You can find that by searching @Slacker Sports.